Hey everyone, welcome to Dave's Bonsai. On today's show, the polar vortex has got the best of us.
So, we are finally having winter in Minnesota. We've had a very balmy Minnesota winter, and January was the 4th warmest on record. So, we barely got down to the low temperatures we typically are used to. 4th warmest January. But now we're going to hit the tundra for a solid 7 to 10 days. So worse than normal. People usually think Minnesota is just super cold all the time, and it's really not super cold all the time. But every once in a while, we hit a surge like this. So this polar vortex that's coming up from Canada is just really gonna stay with us for a while. So it's -1 right now in Minnesota. That's Fahrenheit, -1. And I'm gonna go outside and check the trees in the vegetable garden, and I'm gonna go to the cabin cold frame to deposit some of the water that I had refilled in here and let it sit out there in the cold frame in that room temperature of about 38 degrees or so. So we're gonna go check this out. All right, I'll grab 2 water bottles for now, and let's go. All right. We'll check that garden in a moment. First, we're gonna go drop off some bottles in the cold frame. Yeah, -1. The wind chill right now is -22 because the wind has not subsided from yesterday. It's sticking around. Look at the frost on the windows there. Yeah, some pretty designs. That means it's cold. So I have to take my spruce out and then come inside to the warmth. Yeah, this is probably gonna fog up here now because we have the cold frame looking pretty good. Sorry about that. My big old fat glove in the way. So I'm putting some water down here so it stays, helps to regulate the temperature in here a little bit. There's the heater facing towards that direction. And we're just gonna check the plants today. Got a couple up tall there. The fan there is not on at the moment. Now I just watered these. Actually, was it Friday or Thursday, knowing it was going to get cold. So I don't think I'm going to have to water anything today. I just wanted to kind of check it out because I've noticed on the Govee, let's get a close-up of the Govee there. I've noticed on the Govee in my garage that the humidity has certainly dropped. It's been the driest it has been all year. 71% still in here. So 36 degrees and 71%. It's nice in here. It's where it should be. I don't want it to be any colder than 36, but the heater's on right now because it is cold outside. So things are looking nice and cozy here. Yeah, I could almost, you know, take a little rest out here and not get too cold inside the cabin. Okay. Cabin cold frame is shut down. The winds are starting to whip again. It's just chilly out here. Can't keep my gloves off for very long, but for a steadier shot, we're gonna go ahead and keep them off for a moment. So here we go. Let's go check out the trees. We got our wind barrier up front here, protecting all the trees. We got the eagle keeping an eye on the trees for us. Yep, keeping away those critters. And there we go. So the nice thing about the last couple weeks of winter before this cold snap hit is we got some snow to give it a nice blanket. So we got the wind barrier there, some snow covering all these trees. They got a good 6 to 12 inches of snow covering these pots to give them that extra layer of protection. They're kind of in their own little igloo of warmth. A couple of them are a little bit more exposed than others. Got a mugo pine back there that it's got a lot of stuff above it, keeping it from the wind, so it's not going to dry out, which is nice. So we got some of our dug up larches from the harvest last year. Got this really cool Siberian pine. Yeah, this is gonna be fun. Gonna work on this a little bit more. There's some wire on from the fall. I'm gonna see if I can get some more wire on that before we repot that in the spring. If I repot it this year. That was dug out of a tree farm because of that damage down there. It's given it some really cool character on the trunk, so I'm looking forward to seeing what that can do. Norway spruce there, all bent up. Here are some of those larches from the dug up larches from the harvest again. Lichen on there, looking old. Oh, this wind, burr. White paper birch back there, a clump of those. I don't see any damage from critters at the moment. It just looks cold out here. Another one of the smaller larches that'll go into the forest with that boot tray pot I made. So things are looking good out here. Good looking bunch of trees that are all protected by the snow. It's always really good to check our trees. So it's going to be cold for 7 to 10 days here. We're going to have frigid conditions, so I'll keep an eye on the trees. Not a whole lot I can do with the ones out here because they're frozen in the ground. And the cold frames we can check out, so we'll go ahead and do that. We'll check out those for the next couple of weeks. We'll make sure we check and everything is safe. I got some in the garage. Let's look at those. So I'm in the garage, and a couple of months ago, because of those critter damages to my willow peninsula, I also noticed that the lilac bush clump here was getting some damage too. That's all from the critters right there. That branch is probably going to be survivable, but there's some, look at that. A little critter-made gin right there. Critter-made gin right there. Back over here, part 2 of this big old mangled piece of stuff. This is a 40-year-old tree. I've chopped it down and created some carvings in here. This one's all hollowed out, like it was broken down and hollowed out. It's looking a little bit more dead and natural now. More aging will help that. I'll be able to clean all this up this spring now. This exposed dead stuff here. These things throw up suckers all the time, so I'm not worried about this thing staying alive and growing. But it'll be fun to see what this thing can do. So I got this main branch coming out of here. It's kind of on the inside here with this dead one here. And then I got a couple of branches back here. And this one right up here is kind of the new leader. We'll see what happens. These are some birch cuttings, or excuse me, willow cuttings. Got 3 of those in there. So that's what's in the garage. I kept them in the garage because the critters, we're not going to leave them alone. So I got some natural critter chew, kind of pruning it the way they wanted it. But these lilacs grow like weeds, so it'll be interesting to see what this can do this year in its second year in this big pot. Looking forward to that. So we're checking our trees all the time. We got to make sure that everything's okay. Back there is the other cold frame. So the cold frame back there, I watered this morning, so I got all the trees in there watered. It was super dry. The humidity in that cold frame was at about 27%, 29% in the last couple of days. And we're only in the first of several days of this cold snap. So it's going to stay dry and wintry. And we just have to make sure, I'm checking that cold frame, make sure that thermometer's taking accurate temperatures so we don't dip down too low. That one's in the garage. It should be okay. The one out there, that one's going to be cranking out with that heat in the next couple of days. So make sure you're checking your trees, especially in the upper Midwest with this cold snap, and I hope everything's going well. So we're going to kind of follow a little update with this week of cold weather. We'll give you some updates on the weather, how cold it gets. We'll check the GoV app to see what things are doing, and we'll just do a little monitoring for the next week. So stick around.
Well, that was just the first check of the trees and the cold frames, the polar vortex kind of on our doorstep, reaching down, pushing in, and yeah, let's check it a week later.
It is the 13th of February. The cold spell in Minnesota has been a week long now, and we're going to be in about a 4 or 5 day stretch here where the temperature never gets above 0. Yeah, one of the coldest stretches in February is since they've been keeping records in Minnesota. So, I can't say this enough. We have to check our trees. We have to check our trees regularly. We have to make sure that all the systems are go. So the GoV thermometers are saying that the garage cold frame has like really low humidity, like 27%. The one out here still says in the 50 area range, but it's cold. Now I went out to the garage cold frame and the temperature said about 38 degrees. Some of the pots seem to be frozen, really cold, so it must have dipped below freezing, and I don't think the heat is evenly spread out through the cold frame in the garage, so had to head out here to the cabin cold frame, and we got to check things out. Feels relatively nice in here. That soil's fine. I know that's still wet. These down here are probably a little too dry. Tony asters are fine, that's fine. I just watered these last week, those are all fine. Okay. I don't see anything trying to really butt out too much in here. What I'm worried about up there is the Fukiian tea. Excuse me, not the Fukiian, the quince. The quince up there, that was one I pulled off of the roots of the quince I repotted last year. Everything else looks okay. I don't see anything drastically trying to bud out or anything. It is the middle of February. I'm just checking the soil from all the trees, making sure that things aren't bone dry. And a couple of them are a little bit dry, and so I'm going to water these. And I'm going to go back and check the garage cold frame in a little while because I did move the I moved the GoV. I moved it on the other side of the cold frame, on the left side, further away from the heat source. Because that side, one of the water jugs was frozen solid. So that's not a good sign either. So I don't know if my GoV is acting appropriate. So definitely worth double checking, especially during this cold snap. Going to be checking this probably for the next couple of days religiously. So let's get some of these watered and we'll head back over to the garage. None of the jugs are frozen in here, so that's good. Just get a little bit of water on some of these smaller pots. So when you have small pots in the winter time, the small pots are not going to protect the trees as well as the larger pots. They're also going to dry out faster. So these guys, the Tony asters in the nursery pots are fine. Some of these other trees that are in the smaller pots might be drying out a little bit more rapidly than the bigger pots. I think that one's fine. I got my juniper back here, my cascading juniper that's in a Sarah Rayner pot that gets dry pretty fast. Yeah, all right, so we just got to make sure that we don't dry out all this stuff completely in all this super cold weather that's coming here to Minnesota this last week. Plus, this cold weather means really dry conditions in the cold frames. We've had a really wet year, really humid year in the cold frames. I've actually had a tough time keeping things below 80% humidity in here, and now it's down where I like it in the 50s, so I'm feeling pretty good about this down in here. So just a little bit of water on some of the trees. The small ones that dry out faster. The rest of them, it's only been a week since I watered, so they all seem to be fine. I got a couple of pots way back in there. It's hard to get the water in, so I have to have really full juice containers. And then I get a little bit of water in there. Not the greatest design back there underneath that shelf. It allowed me to put more trees in here this year, but I certainly don't have the easiest access. And when you don't have access to your trees, that's when trouble can set in your cold frame. Especially if you get a spell where it gets really dry in here and you can't get some moisture back in there. So I got some moisture back in there. So we'll get those really tall up trees back there. Those are really small pots. They're gonna dry out the fastest. I got a nice shallow pot that back there with my boxwood in it. Can't wait to repot that this year. For how slow the boxwoods grow on an annual basis that we can see above the soil line, when I've repotted my boxwoods, I've been thoroughly impressed with the amount of roots that are in there. All right, for the rest of this bottle, I'm just gonna go down this maple tree. Make sure some more water gets down there. All right. I think last weekend when I watered back in here, I had about 6 water bottles that I unleashed on the plants. This time it was only 2. The bigger ones, the ones that have more dirt in there, are just fine. Well, there you have it. The thermometer says 31 with 55% humidity. 31 because I've had the door cranked open here for a couple of minutes. So everything looks pretty good. I don't see any early budding. I do see the cotoneasters seem to be pushing just a little bit of what will be the buds next year. So they all look really healthy, like they want to grow. So that's exciting. So I got a whole bunch of cotoneasters for a good price at the end of the season. I can't wait to make those into bonsai. They make great little bonsai with the little leaves. My azalea, I'm going to do a big chop this year. I don't think I'm going to let it bloom out this year. I'm going to think about that some more. And this big maple right here, we're gonna air layer it down here. And then we're gonna have this right here, down here, this branch. It's hopefully gonna be the main branch down there at some point. Or when we chop it here, we'll get some new growth here. The cabin cold frame. Time to head back inside where it's a little warmer.
The trees, upon first glance, look pretty good. The cabin cold frame really seems to be doing its job. I'm hoping, of course, the outdoor vegetable garden area, there's enough snow to protect some of those trees, but they're all Minnesota hardy. They should be fine. Under that blanket of snow is fantastic. The cabin cold frame hovering in that mid to upper 30 range. Hasn't been 40 for a long time. It's just been too cold for too consistent amount of hours. As a matter of fact, when the news was on, when I was starting some of the pre-editing of this show, we had hit 113 hours at the airing of the newscast that I was hearing in the background. 113 hours below zero. Wind chills in the 20 plus range for most of those hours. 18 or 20 below this morning when I woke up. It's going to repeat that tomorrow for one more day. It's been absolutely crazy. But what I noticed about the garage cold frame is that it was drying out. The Govee has been doing its job, and I love the Govee thermometer. I have 3 of them now. Usually there's one in the plant room, and then there's one on the cabin cold frame and the garage cold frame. But I noticed the humidity in the garage cold frame was, you know, the alarm kept going off. I was getting 10, 20 alarms a day, which was saying it was getting really, really dry in there. Well, it's winter time and the relative humidity isn't a huge deal, but that was signaling me to go check out that garage more often, which is why I put this video together and was checking, of course, because of the polar vortex and the cold weather, just gotta make sure everything's working right. And when I went out there, not only was the humidity down low, even though the thermometer said 40 where it was at, the right side of my cold frame, the trees were kind of frozen in the pot there, and the jug of water that's usually water was no longer water. It was a solid block of ice. Something was wrong. So I had to do some investigating. Okay, so here's the test. I'm in the cold frame the next day. We're at about 5 below outside. Wind chill factors in the 20s and 30s due to the wind. The new Govee position was off to the left here because these trees right here were more frozen. It's saying it's 38 degrees right there, which isn't awful. In my maple here, still a little cold. There's a little ice chunk right down here. There's a little ice chunk. You probably can't see that on the camera. Yeah, even the cotoneaster back there is feeling a little bit cold. So it says that it's 38 degrees up there, but I don't know if it is down here. So I'm going to put it down here. We're going to let it stay here for a little bit. It's already dropped to 37 just in my talking. And these trees up here are fine. It's just this row right here. So this is 1/3 of the cold frame. Down here it's super cold. Not sure why. Yeah, and all the trees to the left over here are doing pretty good. So we're going to make sure that this I'm going to test it down lower, and I might turn up the notch just a little bit to make sure that we're getting a little bit warmer in here. All right, I turned it just a notch. The heater kicked back in. We're going to check this in about an hour and see where we're at. Two Govies in the garage cold frame, one on the right side, one in the middle at first, just to kind of see the temperature ranges. And it was in kind of that 40 range. We had as low as 29 on the left side, down low. When I opened up the door a lot, and it was getting down lower into the low 20s for a little while there. But it wasn't quite fixing. I couldn't figure out why I was fixing until, I double checked again. Maybe it was a triple check by this. The cold frame, the door areas. I kept thinking a mouse maybe dug its way in or something through styrofoam. I don't know. It's like there's a hole where the air is leaking out. Well, there was a gap. Let's check it out. I think I discovered the problem. This right here is just pushed up against that back wall over there. It's pushed over there to keep this door nice and tight. And I would push it there, and I thought I had it tight. And the doors were closed. They seemed to be pretty sealed. And the last time I checked, I looked right here, and voila, this gap right here. And as I put my hands here, I could feel warm air coming out from right here. So I gave it a final shove, and we closed that gap so you can't see the gap down into the cold frame. And as soon as I did that and went inside and looked at the temperatures, the thermometer on the right was starting to decrease. The thermometer on the left kind of stayed the same. We're going to go back in there and check now. It's probably been about 5 more minutes. The heater's been on and off since then. Let's check it again. I just moved the thermometer from the bottom shelf to the top shelf. And from that time there to here into my house, it's already up to 30.7 from 29.3, 31.6. And the new thermometer on the right side is still holding steady at that 56 range. So the heater's gone on and off a couple of times. And that bottom section is where it's the coldest, for sure. And of course, heat rises, we know that. But to have it that colder in a 3-foot tall shelf system seems pretty odd still. So we'll see how warm it gets here on this new upper shelf in the middle, while the right side, who now dropped to 53.8. So I'm sure the heater's going to go on fairly soon here. And if it does, that should go back up into the upper 50s. And this is now off of the red zone because it's technically above freezing up there. So that lower left side is still the coldest side of the cold frame, but I'm still not comfy going to bed yet until I figure this out a little bit more precisely. Now this one's red because this is my plant room, and if my plant room is at 60 or lower, I get a little nervous. Usually it's 65 or higher, so that's why it's red right now. But that can go down into the 40s and I'd be quite happy, as long as this keeps going up. And then I have to put the thermometer back on the left side for a while and see if we've stabled off. We're about 10 minutes later, and the one in the upper right hand has jumped to 57. So I'm assuming the heat kicked back in. And the middle upper is now 43.5, so it's kept climbing up, which tells me I'll be able to turn down the heat source a little bit before I go to bed. 57, it's because we don't want it that warm. 43 would be doable, but we're going to have to put that thermometer now that I know that the thermometer is definitely working and moving up and down. Let's go ahead and take that thermometer, put it back on the lower left side, and we'll check it in the next half hour, and see how things stable off. Yeah, we're getting up to 59 on that side, 47 almost on that side. That's going to be too warm, so I'll be able to turn it down a notch and move the thermometer, and we'll check it in about a half hour. Looking at the numbers at about 45 minutes later, the mid left is now 45.
and the upper right is 53, coming closer together. I lowered the heat another notch down so it won't go on as often, and hopefully I'll be in the 40s in both range tomorrow morning.
It took me several times to figure this out. The right side of the cold frame was in the 50s for most of the evening while I was coming in and out of the garage and checking the cold frame, watching a little bit of the television, going out and checking things. And then the left side of the cold frame finally bopped up into there in that low 40s range, but the other side kept in the low 50s range. So there was still 10 degrees different in about a 4-foot wide by a 3-foot high shelf system, all with the pink stuff around it, and the heater going on and off. 10 degrees different. Now one was a little bit lower, and then one was the middle range, so the heat does rise, right? So I lowered it finally, and I was able to go to bed feeling comfortable. It's about 12 hours later. We hit about 20 below zero last night, but the thermometer on the left and right both say 40 to 50 degrees. It's been holding true all day, all night. Lower the temperature for starting the heater a little bit lower, and we'll keep monitoring it. When I woke up the next morning, I had the lower 40s and the lower 50s still. I've turned it down a notch between there, and now it's in the low 40s, upper 30s, low 40s on the left side, and the mid 40s on the right side. Finally got up below 50, and even though I don't want it to be in the 40s long term, because I don't want those roots to wake up too much, I want to try to thaw out some of the pots on the left-hand side. What a crazy adventure. Finally, that little tiny gap where heat was leaving, so there's probably a little bit of heat at the top there, but at the bottom, that was the coldest spot of the cold frame, I think because of that leak up at that top left side. Gotta check our trees a lot in our cold frames in Minnesota, especially when we have a cold spell and this weather takes a really weird turn. Now hopefully the trees in there won't be too damaged. My biggest concern is the Japanese maple, but it never got below 20 degrees in that for any extended period of time, closer to about the 30-degree mark, but they were frozen, so I hope I don't get any root damage. Only the one Japanese maple I think was frozen, maybe two. And then the other trees are all Minnesota hardy. The larch, the tamarack is going to be fine. Check your trees, make sure everything's okay, and yeah, then you won't be disappointed and get a lot of winter kill the next time around. So I'm going to keep taking a peek at it. Our cold spell is not quite over. The vortex is not gone yet. Tomorrow we're supposed to get above zero, and we might have 30s by the weekend. And hopefully we can say bye for another season. And again, this is extremely rare. One of the worst Februarys on record after one of the warmest Januarys on record. Absolutely crazy. Just can't say it enough. Check your trees, take a peek often, and make sure you fix those problems before they become nightmares. That does it. Another episode of Dave's Bonsai coming to a close. But before we go, a quick little tease on what's coming up on the next show. Check this tree out. This jade belongs to Michael, a friend of mine from the Minnesota Bonsai Society, and we are going to tackle this guy. He's been letting it dry for a couple of weeks. We're going to repot this thing, split it into at least two, get all kinds of cuttings, and this monster is going to become a pre-bonsai or an early bonsai. Oh, it's going to be a lot of fun. Hey, take care, everybody. Take care of your bonsai, and we will see you on the next show.